Welcome to Saving Castles, the podcast for castle and chateau enthusiasts. Join us as we explore the fascinating history, stories, and culture of these awe-inspiring structures, from the legends and folklore to the latest in restoration. We'll cover it all, so whether you're a seasoned castle aficionado or just discovering the magic of these magnificent buildings, this is the podcast for you. So grab your headphones and let's dive in.
Welcome, esteemed listeners, to another enchanting episode of the Saving Castles podcast. Today, we embark on a thrilling journey back in time to the Middle Ages, a period of history painted in hues of chivalry, faith, and conflict. We find ourselves at the intriguing intersection of grand stone structures, armoured Crusaders, and the chilling whispers of the Inquisition, a twisted triad that shaped the destiny of an era. The Middle Ages, a millennium-long epoch stretching from the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century to the dawn of the Renaissance in the 15th century, was an era that bore witness to the rise of feudal societies, the flowering of chivalric culture, and the struggle for supremacy between the spiritual and temporal powers of Europe. It was a time characterized by a tantalizing juxtaposition of grandeur and turmoil, faith and skepticism, courage and fear. At the heart of this tumultuous era stood the castles, fortified expressions of power, domains of noble rule, and silent witnesses to the ebb and flow of history. Every tower, turret, and parapet tells a tale, echoing with the laughter of lavish banquets, the commands of battle-hardened lords, the sacred prayers of the faithful, and the hushed whispers of the persecuted. Today we strive to bring those tales to life, to fill the hollow echo with the colour, texture, and vibrancy of the era they encapsulate. Imagine a world where the sun rose and set on the whims of feudal lords who reigned from their castle thrones. The everyday lives of medieval men and women were shaped, to a large extent, by the towering stone structures that punctuated the landscape. These magnificent structures were more than just piles of rocks. They were symbolisms of authority. They defined the social and political landscapes, and they were the epicenters of defence, trade, and even hospitality. Castles stood as an omnipresent reminder of the age-old societal hierarchies, their daunting walls embodying the divide between the powerful and the powerless. As we tread deeper into our narrative, we shall introduce another central character of this medieval saga, the Crusaders. These were men stirred into action by a potent blend of faith, adventure, and ambition, men who left their homes to march under the cross to the Holy Land. Their impact on the medieval world was monumental, reshaping not only the geopolitical landscape, but also influencing the very castles from which many of them hailed. Closely intertwined with the story of the Crusaders was the rise of the Inquisition, a papal mechanism that sought to weed out heresy and maintain the religious purity of Christendom. Although the thought of the Inquisition often brings to mind dark chambers, horrendous torture devices, and the terror of the accused, it was a much more complex institution that shaped the religious, social, and political aspects of medieval life. The Inquisition's shadow extended into the realm of castles, where they often held their tribunals, subtly altering the lives within these stone walls. We shall unravel the threads of this complex tapestry, delving into the intricate relationship between castles, Crusaders, and the Inquisition. We shall navigate through the winding passages of time, peek into grand banquet halls and gloomy dungeons, march alongside armour-clad knights, and sit in the shadowed corners of Inquisition tribunals. Together, we shall strive to understand how this twisted triad of castles, Crusaders, and the Inquisition carved their indelible marks on the parchment of history. So, gather around, dear listeners. Lend your ears to the whispers of old stones and long-gone souls as we set off on this fascinating journey through the annals of history. In the true spirit of the Saving Castles podcast, let's resurrect history, one tale at a time, as we delve into castles, Crusaders, and the Inquisition, a twisted triad. We turn our gaze towards the rise and roll of castles, those magnificent stone sentinels of the Middle Ages. If one were to journey back to medieval Europe, the landscape would be studded with these grand fortresses, towering monuments of stone, commanding respect and inspiring awe. Today, we step into their shadows, tracing the lines of their battlements and turrets to understand the narratives they birthed and bore witness to. As we delve into the early Middle Ages, following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Europe was plunged into a period of fragmentation and flux. The absence of a strong central power led to the rise of local lords and nobles, each ruling their territories from the secure heart of their castles. It was the need for defence, for a stronghold to keep at bay the burgeoning threats of a turbulent world, that catalyzed the rise of these imposing structures. In their earliest forms, castles were simple affairs, often a motte and bailey construction, an earthen mound with a wooden keep atop it surrounded by a protective ditch. Yet, as time wore on, these rudimentary constructs evolved into complex fortresses of stone, equipped with high walls, parapets, and an intricate network of rooms, corridors, and towers. They became architectural marvels of their time, integrating sophisticated defense mechanisms such as drawbridges, portcullises, and murder holes, all while providing comfortable accommodation for their noble inhabitants. Yet, castles were more than mere military installations or residences for the nobility. They served as symbols of a lord's authority and wealth, their tall towers and formidable walls projecting power over the surrounding landscape. A castle could be seen from miles around, a constant stark reminder to the peasantry and rivals alike of the lord's presence and dominion. Indeed, these castles were bustling hubs of medieval society, their walls encompassing a microcosm of the feudal world. Within their stone confines, lords and ladies dined in grand halls, while knights trained in courtyards and craftsmen plied their trades in the lower bailies. Market days would see the castle grounds thronging with townsfolk and merchants, making castles not only centres of power, but also of commerce and community life. These castles often formed the heart of a lord's domain, from which they administered justice, collected taxes, and provided protection to their subjects in times of conflict. They were places of strategizing and governance, where matters of state and local importance were discussed and decided upon. In this way, the castle functioned as the nucleus of power, both politically and economically, shaping the dynamics of medieval society. In the times of turmoil, the castle's primary purpose as a defensive stronghold came to the forefront. Its high walls and imposing towers were designed to withstand sieges, their strength tested and proven by the numerous conflicts of the Middle Ages. Castles were the linchpins in territorial defense strategies, their locations often carefully chosen to guard strategic routes, dominate landscapes, or control resources. As we peel back the layers of history, we shall find the destinies of these castles intertwined with the stories of the Crusaders, those valiant warriors of the cross. Many Crusaders were lords of these castles, using their resources to fund their campaigns, the castles themselves standing guard over their lands during their long absences. Simultaneously, the presence of the Inquisition within these castle walls subtly and irrevocably influenced life within these fortresses. The chambers that once echoed with the revelries of banquets and the clamour of courtly life also bore witness to the whispered accusations and fearful confessions of those caught in the Inquisition's net. We now traverse the rocky landscapes of the Holy Land, following the armoured footprints of the Crusaders. Stirred from their castle keep by a clarion call to holy war, these men embarked on gruelling journeys that would forever change the contours of the Middle Ages. The Crusades, a series of religious wars waged from the 11th to the 15th century, sprang from a complex tapestry of religious zeal, political ambition, and economic desires. Initiated by Pope Urban in 1095 with a passionate plea at the Council of Clermont, he invoked Christian knights to liberate the Holy Land from the infidel Muslims. His words, promising heavenly rewards and earthly riches, set off an outpouring of religious fervour that would span centuries and reshape the world. The First Crusade, from 1096 to 1099, was arguably the most successful from the perspective of the Crusaders. A motley assortment of knights and peasants, driven by a combustible mixture of piety and a desire for plunder, successfully captured Jerusalem and established the Crusader states, a swath of Latin Christian dominions amidst the Islamic Middle East. This period saw castles, such as the Croix des Chevaliers and Quérac, emerge as crucial strategic strongholds, providing bases for further expansion and defence against counterattacks. As we delve deeper into the chronicles of the Crusades, we encounter a period punctuated by victories and defeats, conquests and losses. The Second Crusade, led by the European monarchy, was a catastrophic failure, ending with the fall of the Crusader stronghold, Edessa. The Third Crusade, often romanticized for its legendary battles between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, concluded with a bittersweet truce that granted Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem. Throughout the progression of these crusades, castles played an instrumental role. They served as launch points for the Crusaders, the fortresses from which they marshalled their forces and strategized their campaigns. In the Holy Land, Crusader castles were pivotal in their territorial control strategies, their tall towers offering the Latin lords a vantage point from which they could monitor enemy movements and assert their dominion. Furthermore, these castles were more than just military installations. They were symbols of Crusader sovereignty, their imposing presence a constant reminder of Latin rule in the region. They served as administrative centres, ecclesiastical hubs, and commercial nodes, drawing a diverse array of people within their walls: knights, priests, traders, and artisans. As the centuries wore on, the fervour of the Crusades ebbed, and the Crusader states slowly crumbled under the onslaught of Muslim forces. However, the legacy of these holy wars lingered in the fortified landscapes, the Crusader castles standing as weather-beaten testaments to an era of extraordinary faith and conflict. Yet, it wasn't just in the Holy Land where the Crusades left their mark. Back home, in the heart of Europe, the castles of the Crusader lords bore silent witness to their occupants' absence. The stories of their epic journeys sparked a cultural transformation within these stone walls, influencing everything from architecture to everyday life. The Crusades offer a vibrant thread, one that winds its way from the heart of Europe to the Holy Land and back, connecting castles and the Inquisition in its intricate weave. As we move into darker waters, into the shadowy depths of religious orthodoxy and the chilling chambers of the Inquisition, it is a journey fraught with whispers of heresy, the crackle of burning pyres, and the soft sobs of the condemned echoing through the vaulted halls of castles. The Inquisition, an institution of the Catholic Church, was born out of a fervent desire to maintain religious orthodoxy and unity. Its genesis can be traced back to the 12th century, during a period when the Church was grappling with the rise of heretical movements such as the Cathars and Waldensians. These groups, challenging the Church's doctrinal authority and social order, posed a significant threat to the established Church, leading Pope Innocent III to call for a crusade against the Cathars and later the creation of the Inquisition. In its early incarnation, the Inquisition was not a singular, centralized institution, but a scattered network of local tribunals, each led by inquisitors appointed by the Pope. These men, often from the Dominican or Franciscan orders, were tasked with identifying, interrogating, and punishing heretics within their jurisdiction. The Inquisition's methods were as complex as they were controversial. Suspected heretics were summoned before the tribunal, subjected to questioning, and often to torture designed to extract confessions. If found guilty, the punishments ranged from penances and fines to imprisonment and, in extreme cases, execution, usually by burning at the stake. The inquisitorial process often took place within the sturdy stone walls of medieval castles. These fortresses, which once served as bastions of feudal power and symbols of secular authority, became stages for this divine drama of faith, fear, and fanaticism. The grand halls, which had echoed with the sound of feasting and merriment, now resonated with the solemn words of the inquisitor and the trembling pleas of the accused. Yet the Inquisition's presence within the castle walls extended beyond these tribunals. Its influence seeped into the fabric of everyday life, subtly reshaping the lives of those who dwelled within these fortresses. Castle inhabitants, whether they were the lord and his family, the knights, the servants, or the local clergy, all lived under the Inquisition's ever-watchful eye, their lives marked by an ever-present undercurrent of fear and suspicion. It is essential to note that it was not a monolithic, unchanging entity. It evolved over the centuries, responding to the Church's needs and the socio-political shifts of the era. The infamous Spanish Inquisition, established in 1478 by Ferdinand and Isabella, was a markedly different beast from its earlier counterparts, serving as an instrument of state power as much as a tool of religious orthodoxy. The Inquisition serves as a stark reminder of the immense power of faith and fear. Its shadow fell not just over the accused heretics, but also over the castle lords, their families, and the society they presided over. The medieval world was one where the secular and the sacred were inextricably intertwined, and this connection manifested itself profoundly in the construction of castles. Castles were not merely structures of wood and stone. They were embodiments of power, both temporal and spiritual, standing as testaments to the Church's influence and authority. From the outset, let's dispel a commonly held misconception that the Church is exclusively a spiritual entity, unconcerned with the affairs of the world. In the Middle Ages, the Church was not only a spiritual powerhouse, but also a political player, wielding considerable influence over secular matters, including the construction of castles. As one of the largest landowners in medieval Europe, the Church held vast estates, often granted by devout monarchs and nobles as acts of piety, or in exchange for spiritual privileges. Bishops, archbishops, and abbots often held the same feudal rights as secular lords, including the right to build castles on their lands. Such ecclesiastical castles played a dual role. They served as defensive structures, protecting the Church's territories from external threats, and as administrative centres from where bishops and abbots governed their extensive lands. Within their sturdy walls, spiritual and secular duties intermingled. The same halls that resonated with the echoes of prayers and hymns also bore witness to the signing of charters, the dispensing of justice, and the discussions of economic and political matters. These castles often reflected their dual nature in their architecture. Alongside the conventional elements of a castle, one would often find chapels, scriptoriums, and other ecclesiastical spaces, blending the sacred with the defensive. Many of these castles housed significant relics, attracting pilgrims from far and wide, thereby also serving as important centres of devotion. The influence of the Church extended beyond the boundaries of its own lands. The Church also played a pivotal role in the construction of secular castles. As the custodians of knowledge and learning in the Middle Ages, the clergy were often the most educated members of society, possessing a deep understanding of architecture, engineering, and the arts. Monks and bishops often provided counsel to lords on castle construction, guiding them on everything from site selection to architectural design. Moreover, the Church's spiritual authority could also be a determining factor in castle construction. A lord looking to build a castle often required the blessing of the Church, particularly if the castle was to include a chapel or be dedicated to a particular saint. In this way, the Church exercised a degree of control over castle construction, even beyond its lands. Furthermore, the Crusades and the Inquisition further entwined the fates of the Church and castles. Crusader castles, constructed under the aegis of the Church, stood as symbols of Christian dominion in the Holy Land, while the Inquisition's proceedings often took place within castle walls, their imposing architecture lending a sombre backdrop to these trials of faith. Venturing forth into the rugged landscapes of the Holy Land, where the silhouettes of Crusader castles punctuate the horizon, their stoic walls echoing tales of faith, power, and conflict. These bastions of stone and spirit form an integral part of our exploration of the twisted triad. The Crusader castles were more than mere military strongholds. They were symbols of the Latin Christian presence in the region, embodying the volatile interplay between faith, power, and architecture. Constructed amidst the tumult of the Crusades, these fortresses stand as testaments to the extraordinary confluence of religious zeal, military strategy, and architectural innovation that marked this era. The construction of these castles was often tied to the fortunes of the Crusades. Following the success of the First Crusade, the establishment of the Crusader states led to a flurry of castle-building activity. These structures served as crucial bases for the Latin lords, providing them with defensive strongholds and platforms for further expansion. Castles such as the formidable Crac des Chevaliers, the majestic Montfort, and the imposing Carac were among the many fortifications that dotted the Levantine landscape. Yet these castles were more than just instruments of war. They were microcosms of the Crusader society. Inside their sturdy walls one could find chapels and refectories, barracks and stables, reflecting the diverse functions these castles served. They were administrative centres, where the lords issued edicts and settled disputes. They were economic hubs controlling trade routes and resources, and they were centres of faith, their chapels a constant reminder of the religious impetus that had propelled the Crusaders across continents. These castles were also potent symbols, their towering presence serving as a visual affirmation of the Latin Christian rule amidst a predominantly Muslim populace. They were intended to impress and intimidate, to remind friend and foe alike of the formidable power of the Crusaders. Despite the often harsh and alien environment, these castles were infused with echoes of European architectural styles, a subtle statement of cultural identity and defiance. Yet the fortunes of these Crusader castles were as variable as the Crusades themselves. As the Crusader foothold in the region began to slip, these castles bore the brunt of the Muslim counter-offensive. Some, like the indomitable Crac des Chevaliers, withstood numerous sieges before finally capitulating. Others, like the lofty Montfort, were surrendered without a fight. These castles, once bustling with life, fell silent, their halls echoing with the ghosts of their past. The Crusader castles, with their intricate blend of European and Middle Eastern architectural styles, stand as stone chronicles of the Crusades. They bear witness to the courage and cruelty, the faith and fanaticism, the aspirations and anxieties of a unique historical period. Each stone, each tower, each chapel tells a story, a fragment of the grand narrative of the Crusades. We return now to the European heartlands, but our narrative remains tinged with a sense of foreboding. As we go deeper into the intertwining narratives of castles, Crusaders, and the Inquisition, we encounter the latter's grim presence within the castle walls. The Inquisition and castles are intertwined in ways that reflect the broader nexus of power, faith, and architecture in medieval society. During the Middle Ages, castles served as vital nodes in the execution of the Inquisition's mandate. Castles, with their imposing structures and strategic locations, provided the ideal backdrop for the Inquisition's operations, their very architecture underscoring the institution's authority and power. Inside the castle walls, the Inquisition's activities found an eerie stage. Suspected heretics were detained within the castle's dungeons, their fate hinging on their answers to the Inquisitor's probing questions. These dungeons, often located in the castle's lower levels or towers, were places of fear and despair. The stark stone walls, the scant light filtering through narrow slits, and the oppressive silence all contributed to an atmosphere of dread that hung as heavy as the iron shackles. Yet, the influence of the Inquisition extended beyond the dungeons. Tribunal hearings often took place within the castle's grand halls, the austere environment reflecting the gravity of the proceedings. The accused would stand before the inquisitors, the castle lord, and often a gathered crowd. The imposing edifice of the castle lent an additional layer of solemnity to these trials, underscoring the life or death stakes at hand. Notable amongst these Inquisition castles is the Château de Montségur in France, the last stronghold of the Cathars during the Albigensian Crusade. The castle witnessed one of the most chilling episodes of the Inquisition, when over 200 Cathars, refusing to renounce their faith, were burned en masse at the base of the Pog. Today, the castle ruins stand as a stark reminder of the dark chapters written within its walls. The grim dance of the Inquisition also echoed in the Spanish fortresses. With the advent of the Spanish Inquisition, castles like Alhambra in Granada and Aljaferia in Zaragoza witnessed the Church's relentless pursuit of perceived heresy. The ornate Moorish arches and courtyards bore silent witness to this tale of faith and fear. The presence of the Inquisition also impacted the architecture of these castles. In several instances, modifications were made to accommodate the Inquisition's requirements, such as the construction of additional cells or the adaptation of rooms for use as tribunals. Some castles even had specific areas designated for the public display of penitence or the execution of the condemned. The castle in these instances became an extension of the Inquisition, its stone and mortar reflecting the institution's indomitable will. Yet, as we traverse these grim corridors, it's crucial to remember that the Inquisition's presence within the castle walls also reflected the power dynamics of the time. Castle lords, vying for the Church's favour, often provided the Inquisition with the use of their castles, thereby showcasing their piety and securing their position within the social hierarchy. The narrative of the Inquisition castles is a testament to the power of architecture to reflect and shape societal narratives. The castle walls, steeped in the whispered prayers of the faithful and the cries of the condemned, serve as a poignant testament to the human capacity for faith and fear, compassion and cruelty. And the Inquisition. As we uncover the profound impact of the Inquisition on daily life within these fortresses of stone, we reveal the subtle and not so subtle changes that unfolded under its dark shadow. The presence of the Inquisition within a castle signalled a distinct shift in the fortress's atmosphere. The once bustling courtyards, the lively great halls, and the serene chapels took on a more sombre tone. Fear and uncertainty filled the air, a palpable tension that permeated every corner, from the lord's private chambers to the servants' quarters. For the castle lord and his family, the Inquisition's arrival often presented a delicate balancing act. On one hand, they were called to demonstrate unwavering faith and commitment to the Church. They were expected to provide the Inquisition with full cooperation, often granting them unfettered access to their castles and resources. On the other hand, they had to manage the morale and safety of their household, ensuring their subjects' loyalty despite the pervasive climate of fear. Everyday life within the castle took on an air of unease. Castle denizens, from knights and ladies to servants and squires, navigated their daily routines under the watchful eyes of the Inquisition. The bustling kitchens, the lively stables, the peaceful gardens all fell under this watchful gaze. Conversations were guarded, actions measured, as any sign of heresy could attract the Inquisition's attention. The impact of the Inquisition also rippled out to the castle's dependent communities. Villages and towns under the castle's protection experienced the same climate of fear. As the castle's dungeons filled with accused heretics, the stakes became all too real for these communities. The fortress that had once symbolized protection and stability now stood as a foreboding reminder of the Inquisition's power. The Inquisition also left an indelible mark on the castle's spiritual life. The intimate chapel services, where the castle inhabitants would gather for prayer and communion, were transformed into more formal, scrutinized rituals. The faithful, conscious of the ever-watchful Inquisition, approached their religious practices with heightened fervor and caution. The spirit of communal worship was strained, often replaced by a fearful compliance. As we've seen, the impact of the Inquisition on castle life was not only physical, as in the form of architectural modifications, but also deeply psychological. It cast a long shadow over the castle inhabitants, instilling a climate of fear that disrupted the rhythm of castle life. Yet, amidst the terror, there were also stories of resilience and resistance, tales of castle denizens who navigated these difficult times with courage and cunning. But let's not forget that these castles, for all their stone sternness, are the stages upon which the human drama unfolds. They are the silent witnesses to our shared history, their towers and walls echoing with the hopes and fears of those who walked their halls. The Inquisition's reign within these castle walls is a dark chapter in that narrative, but it is a chapter that we must not forget, for it holds valuable lessons about power and persecution, faith and fear, and the resilience of the human spirit. Let's carry these lessons with us. They are not just a part of our past, but also a beacon for our future. As we approach the penultimate segment of our narrative, we find ourselves on the threshold of momentous change. The fervour of the Crusades starts to wane, and the iron fist of the Inquisition begins to loosen its grip. The castles, stalwart through the tumult of the ages, bear witness to these dramatic shifts in the historical tapestry. In the Holy Land, the tide of the Crusades started to ebb. The dream of a Latin Christian East was slipping away, crumbling like the ramparts of the once indomitable Crusader castle. The Muslim forces, under the inspired leadership of figures like Saladin and Baybars, methodically reclaimed their lands, storming castle after castle. Yet, even in decline, the Crusader castles did not capitulate without a fight. Crac des Chevaliers Antioch, Acre. Their sieges were the last defiant roars of the Crusader spirit. Back in Europe, the echoes of this fading Crusader spirit resonated within the castle walls. The knights, once hailed as valiant Crusaders, returned home, their armour tarnished not only by the rigours of battle, but also by the disillusionment of unfulfilled ambitions. Their tales, fraught with glory and despair, coursed through the great halls, their voices joining the chorus of history etched in the castle stones. In parallel, the shadow of the Inquisition began to recede. The vehement cries for heretic blood lost their potency as the centuries wore on. Increasingly, voices within the Church and society questioned the Inquisition's methods and objectives. While it didn't disappear overnight, the once omnipotent institution gradually lost its sway. The castle dungeons, once the scenes of interrogations and torments, were abandoned, their chilling echoes slowly fading into a grim silence. The decline of the Crusades and the Inquisition also heralded changes within the castle walls. The castles, once the nerve centres of these monumental movements, found their roles shifting. The grand halls, which had once resonated with the fervour of crusade sermons and the stern verdicts of inquisitors, saw their purposes transform. They became arenas for chivalric pageantry and courtly love, their echoes now filled with the strains of lutes and the laughter of feasts. Simultaneously, the architectural evolution of the castles mirrored these changes. The fortresses of the Crusades, which had been built or adapted to withstand protracted sieges, gave way to more residential structures. These later castles reflected a shift in focus from defensive fortifications to comfortable residences. The austere keeps softened into lavish halls, the battlements bloomed into ornamental parapets. Yet the castles never truly shrugged off their past. The architectural vestiges of the Crusades and the Inquisition remained etched in the stone fabric of these fortresses. Each tower, each dungeon, each chapel carried within it the echoes of the castle's history, a physical testament to the tumultuous age of Crusades and Inquisition. As the sun set on the era of the Crusades and the Inquisition, the castles stood firm, their silhouettes etched against the twilight of the Middle Ages. These majestic fortresses, once the stage for the grand drama of faith and power, evolved with the changing tides of history. Yet they remained the indomitable symbols of a bygone era, their walls whispering tales of valor and fanaticism, love and betrayal, hope and despair. The narratives of the castles, the Crusades, and the Inquisition are not just stories from a distant past. They are lessons that resonate through time, their truths reflected in our own struggles and triumphs. Through the corridors of time, we have explored the labyrinthine paths of history, traversing the realms of faith and power, of conquest and persecution. Now, as we gather the threads of our journey, let us weave them into a tapestry of understanding and contemplation. The castles, with their towering walls and majestic presence, have stood as sentinels through the ages. They have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the clash of ideologies, and the indomitable spirit of human endeavor. These fortresses of stone, born from the minds and hands of architects, have not only shaped the landscapes, but also the course of history itself. In our exploration, we discovered how the castles were intertwined with the Crusades, those fervent calls to arms that echoed through the Christian world. The Crusades, driven by religious zeal, ambition, and a thirst for glory, summoned forth knights and peasants alike to embark on perilous journeys to distant lands. These quests for faith and conquest left an indelible mark on the castle landscape, with the Crusader castles standing as enduring symbols of Christian dominion in the Holy Land. Amidst the clash of swords and the chants of battle, the Inquisition emerged as a formidable force, wielding its authority over the hearts and minds of the faithful. The Inquisition's presence within the castle walls cast a long shadow, its influence seeping into the very fabric of castle life. The accused, the convicted, and the innocent alike felt the weight of its judgment as the Inquisition sought to root out heresy and maintain religious orthodoxy. Through the interplay of castles, Crusaders, and the Inquisition, we witnessed the complexities of power, faith, and architecture in the medieval world. Castles, once symbols of feudal might, became stages for the trials of the Inquisition and bastions of Christian rule. They evolved, adapted, and left an indelible mark on the historical landscape, reflecting the triumphs and tribulations of the era. As we stand at the precipice of this narrative journey, what lessons can we glean from this tangled triad? First and foremost, we are reminded of the enduring power of human faith and conviction. The Crusades were born from a fervent belief in a higher calling, a devotion that compelled individuals to venture into the unknown, to fight and to sacrifice in the name of their beliefs. The Inquisition, in turn, exemplified the dangers of unchecked power and the potential for religious zeal to turn to persecution. The castles themselves bear witness to the resilience of the human spirit. They weathered the storms of time, the ebb and flow of empires, and the vicissitudes of fortune. They adapted to changing circumstances, reflecting the shifting dynamics of society. Through triumph and tribulation, these fortresses stood as symbols of endurance, embodying the steadfastness of human ingenuity. Moreover, the intertwined narratives of castles, Crusaders, and the Inquisition reveal the intricate connections that weave together the tapestry of history. The echoes of the Crusades reverberated within the castle walls, shaping the lives of those who call these fortresses home. The Inquisition cast its shadow over the castles, influencing their architecture, their inhabitants, and the very atmosphere within their walls. The stories of these intertwined threads remind us that history is not a linear progression, but a rich tapestry of interconnected events. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Saving Castles podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll continue to explore the fascinating world of castles and chateaus. Don't miss out and subscribe to our podcast to get notified when new episodes are released. For more information about us and our work, visit savingcastles.com. Thank you for listening.